folks, my name is Jen, and today we're going to talk about the books that I read in March. I read 4 books over the course of March because for the most part I was writing. That is what I've been spending the majority of my time doing instead of actually reading, but I still call 4 books, despite that, pretty good. So yeah, I read 4 books over the month. The first of which was a mystery / horror. It was Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King. I did a reread of this, actually. I read this trilogy definitely before I had a booktube. This was several years ago and I really enjoyed it. It's just a little bit something different for Stephen King. Because, you know, he's the man of horror, the king of horror. And this, while there are horrifying aspects to it, tends to kind of head more towards murder mystery. Although you are definitely aware of the killer from the beginning. At least the reader is, even if the other characters are not quite aware of who he is yet. But this follows Bill Hodges, a retired detective. His last case was a massacre that occurred. Fortunately, a total psychopath stole a rich lady's car and drove it into the crowd repeatedly. A crowd waiting outside of a job fair, because this is in an area that has been really affected by layoffs and the economy and everything, and so there's tons of people, including a woman who had a baby. They were all desperately waiting in line way ahead of time before the job fair opened in the hopes of securing one of the, couple of thousand jobs that were going to be available. They were desperately there for that. And this complete douche canoe drove a car repeatedly into the crowd of people. Killing, I forget how many people he killed, but among them was a woman and her baby. It was just truly terrible, and the cops unfortunately did not have a lot to go on, and they were not able to capture this guy. Move ahead to a year. One of the detectives who was on the case has retired, and he is messed up. He's messed up. He is by himself. The job basically took his ex-wife from him, his daughter. He never caught that guy, and he's just kind of been basically spending his retirement watching shitty television and staring at his old service revolver every day. But he finds a will to live when he gets a taunting message from the killer, basically telling him, "What use are you if you never caught me? You should just kill yourself already." That had the opposite effect of what the killer was hoping, instead making Bill Hodges find a reason to live, in that he is going to find this scumbag and get him. So you basically follow Hodges as he teams up with his teenage neighbor Jerome, and also a relative of the lady whose car had been stolen and used in the crime. He teams up with them to find this psychopath, and meanwhile you are getting some information and insight into the psychopath himself, his young man named Brady, who, he's a lot. Now, I really enjoyed this book the first time. I really enjoyed the trilogy the first time I read it several years ago, and I did really enjoy my reread. I will say that I guess something that I became very aware of, or maybe more aware of, in this particular book than I have been previously in things, is that a lot of the times when there are truly terrible people, like the truly evil bad guys in a Stephen King book, there are absolutely no redeeming qualities in them whatsoever. You'll find more nuanced characters or gray area characters. Those are the ones who will have a little more depth to them, and there'll definitely be well, they're still terrible people, but you kind of feel bad because, there's stuff about them. Jack Torrance, for example, you still kind of end up feeling bad even though he's an asshole, because there are redeeming qualities about the guy. There's no redeeming qualities about Brady Hartsfield at all in here. I think he is a study of nature versus nurture. And honestly, I don't know what the right answer is as far as blaming for why a psychopath is born. I think most of the time, and particularly in this case, it's probably a combination of the two. He is, I think, probably up there among my favorite of King's villains, just in the fact that he is, I think, a classic narcissist who thinks he is real fucking special because of the kind of narcissism in him. It makes him a little more interesting, and I do find it when killers taunt the people trying to catch them. I think that's an interesting psychological thing, whether it's in fiction or in real life. I think that is a very interesting addition to their psychological profile when they feel the need to mock the people trying to get them. And I love it because a lot of the times that's when they fuck up. But yeah, this was interesting. I will say, as always with his books, I think there is usually an element or two of something that I'm like, sir, did we need this in here? And I felt that a little bit in here, but for the most part I did really enjoy reading it. I remembered most of the major key points and events in the book, although there were a couple of smaller things that I was like, oh shit, I forgot about that. But still really interesting. I find Hodges to be enjoyable, but to be completely honest, the other characters introduced, Jerome and Holly, are way more fascinating to me. And I honestly enjoy them a lot more. And I've been rereading this. I reread this, so I could reread the whole trilogy because I want to read the offshoot that he wrote a couple of years ago, which is called Holly, which I think follows Holly herself more specifically. Found this fascinating overall, and it is action packed. Like, things move very quickly, and even though it looks kind of dense, things just keep going, and yeah, really interesting. I did start reading Finders Keepers, which is book 2, but that one, I think the first time I read the trilogy, that one was like the slow point for me, and things pick up again in End of Watch. I think that is largely because a chunk of that book does not focus on Golden Trio, like in this one. It focuses in on other characters, but so yeah, I'm still in the middle of that. I'm not that far into it, like a couple of chapters, but yeah, hopefully continuing on with that. And what the hell did I give that? I think I gave it a 5-star the first time I read it, and I think I left it the same. Still 5 stars. Then I also read a sci-fi book. I know, me? Sci-fi? What? I read All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is the first book in the Murderbot Diaries, and this is following Murderbot, who is a droid. It is a unit that is technically AI. It's a robot, but it is also made with like cloned human flesh, basically. So it's like I think it's exactly a hybrid. But it's a company supplied one because there's a group of scientists on this particular planet, and they have one of these as part of their general security. And there are other scientific parties on this planet as well, and something goes terribly wrong. And Murderbot, who has become sentient and managed to hack into their company, whatever, their master key or whatever it is, and basically has gained sentience and does its own thing. it is spending its time trying to hide that fact from the people around them because they don't want to be like turned back into like this mindless unit or something. They are enjoying themselves enough by consuming tons and tons of media, watching a lot of drama shows, you know, stuff like that. And yeah, like I said, something goes terribly wrong and Murderbot is gonna have to like try to help the scientists. This was such an interesting book, and like I have said probably multiple times, sci-fi is not a genre that I usually have a good time in. For the most part, I think it takes itself a little too seriously for me, and I tend to like my science fiction to not take itself seriously. A la Douglas Adams. I tend to be more of like that kind of thing, or like I like sci-fi movies, but when I say I like sci-fi movies, I mean Back to the Future, Evolution, you know, shit like that. I don't mean The Martian or anything. I would hate that. Interstellar, that sounds depressing, no thank you. I like funny stuff. I like a lot of humor, irreverent humor, dark humor if need be. There's snatches of like dark humor in here a little bit. Especially funny because, again, like I said, the robot doesn't, I don't think they technically have a name. They've got like a code, I think. They call themselves Murderbot. And yeah, so it's interesting. I will say my one gripe about this book is that it was so short. I would have loved more, and not that I can really say anything about it because I think it ended right where it should have ended. I think things progressed exactly how they should progress. I just wanted more. I just wanted more out of this world. I found the introduction to this world and how the system works, especially the planet the scientists are from. I found that very fascinating. I would like to learn more about this, and it is the first book in a series, which is a good thing because I want to check out the other books in the series. But yeah, I found Murderbot themselves to be very intriguing. Like, they're desperately trying to have like this fatalistic kind of air of things and not give a shit, but they still ultimately give a shit. And that was something that I found also incredibly intriguing about them as a character. Everything is told from their point of view. I also found that very interesting. Like I said, I do really want to check out the rest of the series at some point. Currently, my brain is taken up by other things and other projects, but I think I have marked like the next couple of books as like, hey, I want to read this, because it was really interesting. And like I said, it's short, it's sweet, it's to the point, and I think that is ultimately what it needs to be. It's very fast paced, but at the same time, I just want more about this world. I want more about this world. I want more about Murderbot. I want more about these other characters, which I'm not sure if we're gonna, I hope we'll see them again. But like, yeah, I want more. I want to know more. It's very intriguing. It's very interesting, which ultimately is really exciting for me because, like I said, I don't really go for sci-fi. Like, a lot of the things that are out there either are uninteresting to me, or I've tried them and DNF'd them, or I'm just not vibing with it. So to find a series that I'm actually like, this is pretty cool shit, that's exciting, you know? So yeah, I really found it very interesting, and I also kind of liked the commentary on capitalism a little bit. Maybe it was commentary on capitalism. The interstellar, the like the World Federation or whatever the heck thing that everything's a part of. It wasn't exactly like a statement on that stuff, but it was very. It was definitely a statement on corporate greed and a different thing. It was very interesting anyway. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I gave this like 4 stars. Then I also read 2 romance novels. One was The Villa by Nora Roberts. Now this is one that I'm like 90% certain that I have read this before, because there were a couple of things that happened that I was like, oh, that sounds familiar. I've forgotten most of this book, so if I have read this before, it's been a while. This is basically following 2 families. I read this at the beginning of the month, so my my brain is like done. It is following two families, the McMillans and the Giambellis. Basically, several years ago, actually more than several years ago, the Giambellis and the McMillans joined forces because the heads of the families got married, and they both had wineries. Now the matriarch of the Giambelli clan has announced that they will be doing a complete merger with the Macmillan winery. So she is changing things up with how the family operates. And her granddaughter, Sophia, who is like a major like PR person, she's basically changed her position and says she has to learn her roots and where the grapes started, essentially. So she is now being forced to join forces with the Macmillans' grandson, Tyler, and who is in charge of the growing, and has to join forces with him and teach him about PR, and he has to teach her about growing. And of course, even though they're kind of related by marriage, technically, it's not that weird because they didn't really spend that much time around each other, and it's the connections. It's weird, but it's not as weird as it could be. So you have some enemies to lovers, sparks flying there a little bit, but then you also have the Giambelli family basically being threatened by outside forces. There's also a lot of bad blood within the family, lots of issues and interconnected relationships and politics within the family and the wine world, and all this crazy stuff. You've got a little bit of a murder mystery, some sabotage, all that good shit, basically. Which typically makes, like, Nora Roberts' romances a little more exciting when she adds, like, those, like, romantic thriller elements in there. I will say, while I did enjoy reading this, I don't think it's necessarily one of my major favorites of hers that I have read. I still gave this like 4 stars, but overall, I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I could have. Sophia and Tyler, I wasn't really grabbed by either of them. Oftentimes, something that I really love about her romance novels is the chemistry between the main two. Or their banter with each other. Whether it be all joking, all fun and games, if it's like half serious, stuff like that. I tend to enjoy that kind of like back and forth with them, the funny quips, like the little cutesy moments. I enjoy that a lot. That was really lacking in this book for the most part, and honestly, both of them, I did not feel a lot of interest in either of them as characters. I found Tyler to be a little too fucking grumpy and a stick in the mud, and I found Sophia to just be a little bit too much of a stick up her ass. I didn't really like either of them that much. I didn't really like her grandmother. I found her to be kind of a hard ass. I liked the head of the Macmillan branch. Tyler's grandfather seemed like a pretty cool dude. Sophie's mother was pretty cool, but her love interest as she gets over the course of the book, I started out liking him, but ended it by thinking he was extremely too aggressive and pushy and just not my favorite either. So that was a problem, and I will say that, yeah, well, I found it interesting, and I was on the edge of my seat because, like I said, when I read this, I've forgotten a lot of things out of it, so I also forgot who the big baddie was and the twists and turns and things like that. So I was on the edge of my seat for that. But I also didn't feel like the stakes were as high with this one, and I also just didn't really care as much because I didn't connect with the characters as much as I normally do. Alright, if not connecting, I didn't find them as endearing as I normally do, which was a shame because this is full of a large family, or a large couple of families joined together, and I did not find them as endearing as I normally do find her characters when they are parts of large sprawling families or friend groups. I usually find that to be some of her best passages, if it's not the banter and stuff between the two love interests is the absolute shenanigans of like the extended families or friend groups are really enjoyable, but that was very lacking in here too. So yeah, I gave this 4 stars, but it wasn't, yeah, not a particular favorite of mine of hers. And I will probably most likely ultimately reread it because I do end up rereading her books, not like fairly often, but every few years or something, I will say. I don't think this will be high on my list of ones that I will be like rereading soon. And the last book I read, speaking of books you read or reread, and I read Fan Service by Rosie Danan. So this was on my anticipated reads of the year list, and I was excited to read this book. Let me tell you what it's about. So this is following Alex Lawson. She's from this really small, conservative, shitty-ass town in Florida, and she's always felt kind of like an outcast. Her dad's like a wolf scientist, and that kind of outcasted their family because he introduced red wolves into the state park, and that pissed off a lot of people, because of course it did. So she's always been kind of an outcast, and then when her mom left, she ended up getting really into this supernatural-esque show about a detective who ends up becoming a werewolf and dealing with all of that and dealing with like this vampire rival and, you know, all this kind of stuff. She got super into it. She ran as a teenager this like forum, a whole website. She was the moderator of this whole fan site. And unfortunately, she met her hero, Ashwood, who plays the werewolf in the show, at a con, and he ended up insulting her, and she turned from idolizing him to hating him. Flash forward like 17 years. Alex is grounded in this small town still by debt and trying to help her dad, who has had some health issues. And Devin Ashwood pops back into her life again. He has recently undergone some changes and thinks that he is turning into a werewolf. So he goes online to find help for it, and what does he find but the old forum that Alex ran? And he decides that this is his only hope, basically, of finding some help to understand what's going on with him, and so he turns to Alex for help, and the greatest ship ever was born. So, yeah, like I said, I wanted to read this book, obviously. I thought it sounded interesting. I thought it sounded funny, intriguing. I am not an enemies to lovers girl, really. That's not a trope that I normally really go in for. But I did think that the story sounded intriguing, and as someone who, I have written fan fiction, I never was big in posting it where other people could see it because I was too self-conscious, but I did consume a lot of it. Like I read a lot. I read a lot of fan fiction in my day. Like, a lot. And as someone who was fairly obsessed with certain supernatural shows at the time, my particular favorite was Moonlight, which was very short-lived, one season of a show back in like 2007 to 2008, and it followed Mick St. John, who was a vampire private eye. And if you know what I'm talking about, please tell me down below, because anytime I mention it, most people don't seem to know what the hell I'm going on about. I'm gonna rewatch it because this made me think of it, even though this is werewolves versus vampires versus whatever. Yeah, I loved that show. Anyway, so I was like, oh, this is just gonna be fun anyway, because it involves like fan fiction, and it involves like, oh my gosh, this kind of like wish fulfillment-y fanfiction Wattpad-y like shit about what happens if you meet this celebrity you have a fucking crush on or whatever. So I was like, oh, this is gonna be a fun romp. That'll be a good time. Guys, I did not expect to love this as much as I fucking did. To the point that, can I just tell you, I read this at the end of March. I just finished rereading this 2 days ago. I have now read this a couple of times within the span of a couple of weeks, and I don't do this. This is not me. This is not what I do. While I do reread books, and you hear me talk about rereading books, normally it's I'm rereading it after several years, or I'm rereading it because I'm doing my annual reread of certain books that I read once a year. I can't really think of a time when I've ever done this where I've read something and then turned around and read it again almost immediately. When did I do that? Was it Princess Diaries when I was in high school? I don't know. This, oh my goodness. So this was funny. I have a lot of pages bent down. I really like the mixed media stuff going on in here, which I love when there's mixed media. So it's like the regular story. Then you've got little posts from the old forum. You've got text messages. You know, I includes emojis, which is funny. But like, yeah, it's got like that kind of stuff in it, which is an element that I really enjoy too. And I don't know, you guys. It's so fun and it's funny, but there's also a lot of like character growth between the two characters. There's a grumpy sunshine thing going on, which I'm also kind of meh about as a trope in general. It's not something that I particularly like or dislike. It's not something I really spend a lot of time thinking about or seeking out or anything. I did kind of enjoy that, actually, and I did also like that it's switched, because I think a lot of the time the grumpy sunshine is like the guy's grumpy, the girl's a sunshine. Not in this one. The guy is basically a fucking golden retriever. Well, golden retriever is the wrong word, because he can be kind of a dick. I don't know. He dog-like, which makes sense, because werewolf. I really like the supernatural elements. I think they were well thought out. I will say that is involved with one of my two little issues about this story. So the one issue is the werewolf explanation. There is an explanation given, but I think there could have been more. But then again, is there any fucking explanation in supernatural stuff anywhere in a lot of things? Aren't most things just suddenly, oh hey, werewolves and vampires exist? It's a pops out of nowhere. So I guess I can accept that the explanation for suddenly becoming a werewolf is a little bit random. I guess I can accept that. But yeah, that's like my only real issue. There are a couple of scenes which feels very, very wish fulfillment-y. But I mean, at the same time, I can't totally hate on that either, just because of the very nature of this story, which is very heavy into basically a love letter to fan fiction, and also kind of a love letter to just fandoms in general. And I think that it also at one point almost pokes fun at that, so I mean, I can accept it. The spice is spicing in here, you guys. I read romance novels. I've read a lot of romance novels over the year. This is not normally the type of thing that I read. Stuff that I read, it tends to be slightly more tamer. So like Nora Roberts or Alyssa Cole. Well, yeah, Alyssa Cole is a little more tamer than this, I think. This was things. I learned some things about myself. And what more can you ask of when you're reading a romance novel by an author you haven't read before? Yeah, I really loved this, and like I said, I loved it so much I read it fucking twice. Because again, character growth, the sexy bits, the lovey bits, the jokes, it's it's really fucking funny. And scandalous. At one point in here, the character said something totally scandalized. I'm like, girl, I'm right here for you. I'm fucking scandalized reading this in public right now. Scandalized. But yeah, so I really liked it. This is great. I will definitely be rereading this again. I have talked this up to a couple of people now. And I did also just get, I know she's written a couple of other books. I just got Do Your Worst, which is an older book of hers, which I started reading. Yeah, I'm like a chapter into it. But who knew? I loved this. This is probably going on already top books of the year. 100%. Yeah, great. Loved it. 5 stars. Wonderful. Read it. So yeah, that was everything that I read in March. Can't believe it's partway through April already. That feels really weird. Hopefully this is a little bit of a shorter wrap up for you guys. I've been mindful about taking way too long to talk about stuff lately, and honestly I have day 2 of a headache right now, so I'm just trying to be quick in general. But yeah, anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed hearing about these. I hope that if you haven't read them, that interested you enough to read them. Let me know if you guys have read any of these, and let me know if there's any you would suggest because of what I've said. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for always watching. If you're new here and would like to subscribe, please indeed do so, and I will see you guys next time.